Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Tom Marino, the Chairman of the Joint Public Protection Committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting. Before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the council chamber at West Berkshire Council. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube so that members of the public are able to follow the proceedings. The other committee members in attendance are Councillors John Harrison and John Porter from Bracknell Forest Council and Councillor James Cole from West Berkshire Council. Members are being supported by a number of officers from the two partner authorities, including from the PPP. They're in attendance either in person or remotely. Welcome Claire Lawrence back to the JPC in her new role as the Exec Director for Place at West Berkshire Council. I can't see Eric Owens in attendance, but I would like to thank him for support in his interim role as the Executive Director for Place. For any votes, members of the committee present in the chamber are the only ones who can take part in the formal decision. They'll be asked to vote by raising their physical hand. Thank you. So we'll move swiftly on to item 1, which is apologies. Stephen, have we had any of those?
No apologies for absence, Chairman.
Okay, so we'll move on to the item 2, which is the minutes. Members, are you willing to accept the minutes for the previous meeting as an accurate record? I'm happy to propose them from the chair if no one has any objections. Can I get a seconder for that, please? Thank you. So can members please indicate by raising their hand if they agree that the minutes can be signed off as a true and accurate record? Great, I'll do that at some point this evening. So item 3, matters arising. I understand that in relation to item 2, contact has been made with the relevant officer and the meetings are now in the diary. Any queries from members at all on that, Sharon?
Yeah, Chair, just to update that I actually have met Sharon Warner from Bracknell Council now, and we're just basically making sure that everything that the Public Protection Service contributes is on the Bracknell plan.
Councillor Cole.
On number 1, I was trying to understand the update because the first paragraph seems to say no, and the second paragraph seems to say yes. Have I misunderstood it? If I haven't, what will happen?
It was Moira.
I think John will be covering that in his report on the partnership this evening, Chairman. John Winston is the first item on the agenda. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so can't see anyone else, so we'll move on to item 4, declarations of interest. Stephen, have we had any of those either?
No, Chairman, none of those.
Okay, great. So item 5, public questions. Understand that no public questions have been received which relate to either a general issue concerned with the work of the PPP or to an item on the agenda. So we'll move to item 6, the forward plan. Members, officers, any changes that need to be made to the forward plan? Any comments? Okay, no, can't see any. So move swiftly on to item 7, the Water Safety Partnership Annual Report. John, you're taking us through this one.
I am. Thank you, Chair. The Water Safety Partnership was formed in 2021 after a tragic incident on the Navan Canal in Newbury. So it's included in the report is the membership, which involves the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, Thames Valley Police, West Berkshire Council, also the NHS and the ambulance service as well. We also have the Canal and River Trust. We've had members join us from Newbury Town Council and also the MP's office. We have met regularly over the last year. And we have an action plan which is constantly updated. We have a communication strategy which we've also published as part of this report, and we have been looking at targeting areas of known problems in terms of the statistics that the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue are aware of in terms of water safety. So we feel that we've been actively progressing our terms of reference, and also we've acted in accordance with them. And we're also, as part of a recommendation of this report, is to invite attendees from Bracknell Forest Council as well. Detailed in the report is what we've been doing over the last year and what we propose to do for the next year. And I'm happy to take any questions, but I will first of all cover the comment made by Councillor Cole, in that yes, it is a bit of a conflict in terms of an answer in terms of that action. The Health and Wellbeing Board did state that they are happy with the current coverage of defibrillators, but the Water Safety Partnership does feel that it would be a good idea to put defibs where we have water safety cabinets, of which we have 3 in West Berkshire at the moment. So that was the answer that I got when I asked both bodies the question. So whether we do or we don't, I don't know, is probably up to for further discussion. Any questions?
Actually, before I take any questions of conscious members, Water has reminded me, I do recall in the papers in the contaminated land strategy, which is coming up, Thames Water, I mentioned a couple of times, have got a partner and a brother who work for Thames Water. Shouldn't be any problem at all, I don't think, but I'm just going to chuck that out there just to be absolutely safe. Anyone want to comment on this particular item? We've just heard from John. I'll take Councillor Cole, and then Sean, I guess you can come in after that if you want to clarify anything.
Thank you, Chairman. Who are the potential users of the water safety cabinets, given that they are apparently locked?
Well, the users, there is a code on the cabinet. So what you do is you ring Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, and they will give you a code to unlock the cabinet if there is an incident. So those are the users. So if there is a water safety incident, you ring up. There'll be a number. There's a number on the cabinet. You ring them up, and then you get the code to unlock the cabinet, and you can use the throw rope and the beaconette, etc. That's inside there. So that's the intended use.
Makes the assumption that you have a phone with you.
Yes. Yes.
I think I find that a bit of a problem. But perhaps that's something for discussion in the future.
It is.
Okay. In 4.3, we've encouraged the estate to continue to keep the permitted path through Speen Moors open, supporting them with advice on measures to safety discourage swimming in the pools. What does that mean?
Apologies, I'm just looking. So it was open, supported with advice on measure to safely apologies, that's not worded particularly well. To discourage swimming in the pools or near weirs and bridges. So it's really just working with the estate to try and put signage up there to look at where they could position guarding or anything like that to try and discourage swimming in inappropriate places.
Okay. And lastly, at this point, I take it that water safety risks do not include the risk of drinking it. In other words, the problem of drinking polluted water while swimming, which is a real part of our rivers, sadly.
It's not something that we cover as part of the Water Safety Partnership, but pollution, it would be something that we would encourage to be reported to the proper authority, which would be the Environment Agency, if it was something that we came across as part of our work.
But we don't see it as part of our responsibility, you are saying?
Well, under the relevant act, it's generally the responsibility of the Environment Agency, I believe. But it doesn't directly fall within the remit of the Water Safety Partnership. It's more risk of drowning under the terms of reference that we're trying to prevent. But needless to say, as a responsible authority, we would report any instances of pollution through to the Environment Agency.
I see. Thank you.
Sean, did you want to come in now, or do you want to wait until all the members have spoken? Because I can see other members indicated. Okay. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, a question about whether or not we have any numbers of incidents in Bracknell Forest at this stage, because I know we're looking at maybe taking part in a similar thing to this Water Safety Partnership.
Chair, I mean, I'm not aware of the figures for Bracknell. What I would say is that actually we did hold a number of events in Bracknell last year. So we have run, although you will be kind of taking part more formally going forward, as we've identified a representative now, basically from Bracknell Forest to represent Bracknell on the partnership. We did actually go ahead and run a number of awareness events and the like in the borough last year. And we will be doing again this year jointly with the fire service. I can get the figures in terms of water safety incidents in Bracknell. I mean, they will be available. I will get those and I will share them with the committee. Thank you.
We've had a number of occasions, especially during lockdown, of large groups of teenagers congregating around standing water, around ponds, basically, or small lakes in Bracknell Forest. And one of the issues is we've had buoyancy aids up on poles near there, and we tend to find that those have been very regularly thrown into the water. So I think the idea of a cabinet that has an unlock code is quite a good one. Even though, as Councillor Cole says, you know, you've got to assume that people do have a phone with them. It's probably better that we do assume most people do have mobile phones with them most of the time. And it would not be good if we had somebody who was in trouble in a body of water like that, and if the buoyancy aids were not available to help them because they'd been thrown in the water at a previous occasion. And this is a good way of keeping them from that happening.
Yeah, or maybe both. And so I think that's a very good point. So obviously, once you've got a representative on the partnership, John, I mean, we can pick that up, can't we? Because the representatives, the other representatives on the partnership do in fact cover the rest of Berkshire. So Royal Berkshire,
Yes,
Rescue and everything else. So certainly we can pick that up, and we can look at basically whether there's some opportunities around the installation of something similar in Bracknell around the lakes and other bodies of water.
I wouldn't want to have the introduction of safety aids to actually encourage people to jump in the water in these places, because it's not necessarily that safe. And as Councillor Cole referred to, there may be disease in the water, there may be rats, there may be sewage if you're in the rivers, and there may be all sorts of health problems that come from swimming in the water besides drowning.
Yeah, and that's why the programme obviously includes work within community engagement, but also in schools and things like that. So we can take that forward, and we'll certainly pick that up at the next meeting, John, can't we?
yeah, of course.
Thank you both. Councillor Porter, did you have anything you wanted to tell me? Sean, was there anything else you wanted to say before we moved on, or is that it? Okay. So the committee's asked to note the report. And to resolve that the terms of reference are updated to include Bracknell Forest Council and officers in there. So I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Can I get a seconder for those recommendations? Councillor Cole, thank you. Ask the members vote by raising their physical hands on this. Right, that's carried. So we'll move to item 8, the review of the West Berkshire Council Contaminated Land Strategy. Russell, I think you're doing this, but Sean, I think based on some comments made last week, you're going to provide some context around the equalities part of this report first.
Yeah, I just wanted to update on a couple of issues set out in the equalities impact assessment. There is reference to, I think the first one talks about there is no significant inequalities issues associated with this strategy, albeit that young children are more likely to be adversely impacted by exposure to any given level of contamination. Well, that of course is true, but obviously different people are susceptible to different contaminations, and contamination and other substances, toxic substances, can affect everybody. So we will just make that amend. The other piece I just really wanted to also add was that obviously one of the issues in terms of impact can be that the high price of mitigations around contaminated land can obviously themselves impact the affordability of affordable housing, basically, or the viability of affordable housing, which of course potentially can bring around its own inequalities. So, Chair, with your permission, we'll make those two amends to the report. Thank you.
That's fine with me. So following that, Russell, I think you're going to take us through the rest of it.
Good evening, members. You will recall that the Bracknell Contaminated Land Strategy was presented to you at the September 2022 meeting. This is the West Berkshire iteration of the report and seeks to update the 2014 version of the document. The Contaminated Land regime in Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act 1990 was introduced by Section 57 of the Environment Act 1995. The regime came into force in April 2000. Under this regime, local authorities in England are required to prepare, implement and keep under periodic review a contaminated land inspection strategy, setting out how it will identify and deal with contaminated land within its district. A local authority should set out its approach as a written strategy and should keep this strategy under periodic review to ensure it remains up to date. The previous strategy was last published in 2014 and was undergoing review in 2019-20 when COVID struck, and then Homes for Ukraine, therefore diverting resources and priorities away from this piece of work. The 2023 revision reviews the Council's aims and objectives, as well as progress made in implementing the strategy. It also updates the relevant action plans and procedures, taking into account the Council's current priorities and changes to the contaminated land statutory guidance. No significant changes to the Council's overall strategy have been made. The history of industry and development within West Berkshire means that we do not have many significantly contaminated sites. 179 potentially contaminated sites have been removed as they were either not considered to be contaminated land or they have had remedial works carried out on them. This includes 32 high priority sites. A further 52 high priority sites have also been re-risk assessed to a lower risk following investigative work, which included information research and site walkovers. The core mechanism for managing and remediating contaminated land since 2014 has been the planning system through development control. The planning regime allows planning conditions to be applied to proposed developments within the district and thus allows for the control of remediation on contaminated sites. Legal services have looked at the scheme of delegation and confirmed that the JPPC can approve the plan as set out in the recommendations. Myself and Sean are happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Russell. Before inviting anyone to speak on this, just to confirm, the layout and the presentation of the report will be updated before it's published, and we've agreed the wording at this meeting. Also, I would like to add an additional recommendation to those on the report, as has been alluded to. This was last looked at in 2014. I know obviously there are reasons but why it might not have been looked at in the same way in 2019. However, I'd like to add a recommendation that the document be reviewed if necessary, refreshed at least every 5 years, and that's quite consistent with guidance on similar sort of strategies. Can I get a seconder for that recommendation addition? Thank you, Councillor Cole. Vote by raising our hands on that addition. Thanks, everyone. So does any members want to speak on this item or ask any questions? Councillor Cole.
Page 57 of the pack. What is a relevant non-human?
I don't know whether
I was particularly
Which of you want to
interested in
take
the
that?
word relevant.
I kind of read that as maybe a pet or something, but again,
We need to clarify.
That refers to property.
Property. And what do you mean by property? Because that's an interesting word to use by itself. I mean, does property include a horse? For the sake of argument.
No, it doesn't refer to our animals. It refers to property as in land and buildings.
Perhaps it needs to be clarified then within this document.
Should animals such as horses and potentially other domestic animals be included in that as well, potentially? If people are walking around, they happen to come across a bit of contaminated land, there is obviously going to be an impact on, a dog or a horse or, whatever animal you happen to be with at the time. I mean, I guess if they don't fall into property, even though some people do see them that way, I mean, maybe there's.
See, we have a site, the Compton site, that is kind of relevant to that, given what it used to do. And it is, planning permission has been put through to decontaminate the Compton site. But if you know anything about that site, thinking about animals, it's kind of relevant. I was thinking of talking about the Compton site, perhaps within priorities as well. But it does seem to me that that particular part of the document needs clarifying.
Can I just suggest, Chair, that we just take that point away? I understand what you're alluding to, and yeah, we'll take that point away and have a look at that before the final sign off.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to comment on this? Okay, no, that's fine. So again, I'm happy to propose the recommendations that we consider the revised contaminated land strategy, approve the strategy subject to amendments agreed at the meeting, as we've just discussed, delegate authority to the public protection manager in consultation with the chairman of the JPPC to make any minor amendments to the strategy prior to being published, and the new recommendation that we agree that the strategy be refreshed at least every 5 years. Can I get a seconder for those recommendations? Or Stephen?
Sorry to interrupt, Chairman. There's a hand raised because we haven't got our Zoom screens. We're not aware of it, but the Zoom host informs me that Claire Lawrence has got a hand raised.
Oh, sure. Claire, if you want to come in before we continue with the recommendations.
It was Councillor Mrs. Hayes here as well on the contaminated land part, which we all 6 authorities are contributing to the security of it. Does that cover, because at this point in time, there is an application, a planning application, should houses be built next door to it, that the security of it and dogs getting from these properties onto that land, have we covered ourselves in that capacity legally? Because this will happen, that this is a very large site as well that the 6 authorities belong to on the London Road in Bracknell. Just for the, I would like that clarified also. Okay.
I don't know which one of you wants to take that.
Well, I mean, obviously I'll pick that up, Chair. So obviously the Bracknell Forest contaminated land strategy was approved by the executive, I think earlier this year, wasn't it? Following its appearance at joint committee last autumn, as I recall. So, I mean, what we'll do, Councillor Hayes, is basically we'll pick that specific point up with you that you've raised, and we'll ask one of the officers to pick that point up with you and talk it through with you, and advise accordingly.
I think Damien James has put his hand up also.
Yeah, Chair, is it okay if I just comment on that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to reassure Councillor Hayes, obviously, we, as Sean has said, the contaminated land strategy for Bracknell Forest went through its executive committee a couple of months ago. So we will take a look at that, Councillor Hayes, and come back to you.
And Chairman, if excuse me, if I may, I hadn't actually put my hand up, so I think there was a mistake that it was actually Councillor Hayes who put a hand up. But just, if I may, just on one of the points that was raised around the reference to relevant non-human receptors, I'm just wondering if that was actually quoted directly from the legislation, because it seems to appear in the text that it might have been something that's set out in the actual legislation, the part 2A of the contaminated land legislation, but obviously it might be something that wants to be clarified as part of the document. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But I think we can definitely add, even if it's just a sort of a ellipsis afterwards with some additional wording in there just to make it a bit clearer. That's fine. Any other contributions from Zoom or anyone online? Okay, I'll take that as a no. So go back to those recommendations. Like I said, I'm happy to propose them from the chair. Can I get a second for the recommendations? Councillor Cole. So ask members to vote on those recommendations by raising their physical hands. Great, thank you. So in that case, we'll move to item 9, which is the Public Protection Partnership Priorities 2021 to 2023 refresh. Sean, if you're going to take us through this.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So in June 21, I believe the committee received the strategy for the service going forward with the priorities set out in it. That was accompanied later in the year by a work plan. We did say that we would refresh that strategy in due course, and I did toy with various ways of doing that. And one option was to bring back a paper with lots of track changes and things like that, so you could see that. But in the end, I decided that perhaps the best way of laying it out was just to actually set out in the appendix to this report, really some of the areas that have come about in terms of change to priorities, or areas, for example, where there is new legislation, or areas where there is new focus. So just running through the report in a bit more detail, we're proposing that we keep the cross-cutting priorities. So at the moment they're e-crime, climate change, although we're suggesting changing the climate change one to be climate change and environmental protection, which recognises in particular the work that we've just talked about, but also some of the work particularly that's been undertaken in Bracknell around environmental crime as well. Protecting vulnerable adults and children, safeguarding, I think, will always remain a high priority for the service, safer streets. And then it's proposed that we add a new cross-cutting priority, which is protecting and improving health, because there is so much, particularly that we've identified. I mean, there's always been health protection work that the service does and health promotion work that the service does. But more recently, obviously, there's more and more of that. So we would add that as a cross-cutting priority. Just moving into the actual proposals for priority changes. So the priority number 1 from the original plan was accidents in commercial settings. We're going to actually change that to health and safety enforcement, because that covers enforcement more widely rather than just accidents as well. And it also includes areas such as basically encouraging good health and safety standards in premises. In terms of air quality, I won't go through every single one of these, but we intend to carry on with some of the work that we've been doing as a result of the DEFRA-funded project that relates to air quality around schools. And in particular, the discouraging of idling of vehicles and engagement with schools and the wider population. To look at further work around incentivisations of low and no emission vehicles. And we've had this discussion, as Councillor Porter knows, at Bracknell in relation to school transport. And then obviously later in the year, we've got new regulations that cover particulate levels. And obviously there will be a lot of work for us to do around that. Alcohol and tobacco thing, I think probably the main area there is there has been a lot of focus, as members will know, more recently on the issue of vaping products, young people and vaping, illegal vaping products. And so we have a broad, I suppose, kind of broad approach to that, which includes education, which includes enforcement, which includes working with retailers, and we're intending to make that a big part of the focus over the next 12 months to remove some of the illegal products and to reduce access by young people and to discourage using vaping products by young people. We're going to continue to do the work with all of the public health teams. So with Bracknell, that includes some of the work that we've been doing, particularly around housing. Another, I suppose, prioritisation again around illegal and unlicensed animal breeding and retailing. So for those that have been on the committee a while will know that a number of investigations and prosecutions that we've had have related to unlicensed breeding of animals or unlicensed retailing of animals. And we intend basically to continue to focus on that, because we believe that there are probably still a number of traders out there and a number of animal breeders out there, basically, which aren't licensed. We intend to delete the COVID recovery priority, because I think we're now picking that up as business as usual, really. And the last area of that, I suppose, has been around either picking up some of the, catching up with some of the strategy updates, but also, as I come on later on, to talk about the last year, basically, the food inspection recovery programme. And where we're up to with that. So that one will be deleted. Obviously, we'll retain any data and contributors required to the COVID review or response review, national one. So the doorstep crime one, mass marketing one, we're going to basically broaden that out. This is what we're proposing is to change the priority name to tackling fraud. And one of the reasons being is that there is a significant TVP priority around tackling fraud now. And we are very well kind of plugged into that priority, and we're working very, very closely with TVP on arrangements to do further work around fraud prevention, but also investigation and interventions. Environmental protection, we've talked about basically continue to work with the CSAS accredited organisations. We've now got one of those in Bracknell, and to extend existing areas around fly tipping enforcement and waste carriage in Bracknell to other areas of environmental crime, including fly posting. And obviously later on in the year, we'll have various bits of new responsibilities, which I don't suppose will put much of a burden on us. But in terms of the local authority, we will have the responsibility around the deposit return scheme for bottles and the single-use plastic ban. And then we are looking then to implement a new enforcement regime around particularly around minimum energy efficiency standards. Food safety standards I've talked about. It's all about recovery. Housing has been a big priority area this year, a lot of emphasis on damp and mould, and we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to support the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the implementation of the MOU with Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, develop further the work that we've done with social landlords. But in particular, we're looking at options about what can be done around empty homes in the borough. And I had a meeting at Bracknell this week, and we'll be having further discussions at West Berkshire about what opportunities there are to use the range of powers and things like that. The local authority have got to bring empty homes back into use. So noise priority just changed to nuisance, and I've already talked in terms of consumer goods about illegal vaping products. We've added 3 more. So one of them is licensing. So at the last time this came before the committee, I think it was you, Councillor Porter, asked, I think, why there was no individual one for licensing. And it was, and at that time we were able to say, well, lots of this stuff was being picked up as part of other priorities in the service. But in fact, actually, there's now quite a lot of work going on within the licensing service itself around reviews of policies, a review of things like the DBS process, the taxi knowledge test, the implementations of Martin's Law, and the undertaking the work around the new DFT guidance and the consultation for that. So that's got its own place now, as has the cost of living. So obviously one of the issues, one of the long-standing ones around COVID has dropped off. There's obviously a very topical issue at the moment around the impacts of cost of living. And then finally, the service improvement priorities, which actually were brought to this committee at the last meeting as part of the service planning process as well. So I'll stop there. Sorry, I probably went into more detail than I intended to, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sean. Very comprehensive. Particularly pleased to see the stuff about vaping. It seems to be something that just annoys me everywhere I go nowadays. 12, 13-year-old kids vaping the most disgusting smelling stuff while I'm trying to, enjoy the football or something. Please see that in there. Any members in the room want to? Councillor Harrison, go ahead.
Thank you. Something that's been in my mailbag recently is reference to trophy hunting and the importation of animal-derived materials from rare species overseas. And I think there's a bill possibly about to go through Parliament. I'm not that informed on that, but I thought I'd pick that up with you and see if that can be covered under the animal welfare, if through trading standards we are going to investigate any illegal importation and sale of things that shouldn't be on sale.
Yeah, thank you. Funny enough, this was a topic that was being discussed on the radio as I was driving home tonight. So you're quite right to say that I understand that there is a bill going through Parliament effectively to ban bringing into the country sort of, I suppose mementos of trophy hunting, for want of a better word. I don't know where the enforcement responsibility will lie for that in due course. I mean, we have occasionally picked up some enforcement responsibilities that do relate to things like the use of furs from animals and things like this. So a few years ago, there was an issue with furs that were being used on things like parka coats and things like that that turned out to be animal furs. And there was responsibility that was handed to us for that. We'll have a look at the legislation. I'll have a look at the bill and see what responsibility, if any of it, falls to the local authority.
Any other members in the room? Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Chair. Sean, thanks for the presentation. Item 9, the last bullet point, significant numbers of HMOs, but the number of unlicensed HMOs. So how serious is the problem within Bracknell and West Berkshire? And what can members and our residents do to assist in gathering intelligence to assist you in identifying these unlicensed HMOs, please?
This is a really important issue that you raised, the whole issue of HMOs and unlicensed HMOs. I mean, we are dealing with we're investigating a number of unlicensed HMOs now, including some in Bracknell. But obviously, you know, it is identifying them is a kind of can be a lengthy and kind of complex issue. We do work with the housing team who've got some idea about basically some of this information. But actually, you're quite right. Actually, one of the probably the people that know on the ground are our members. Actually, they may have some suspicion, even if they don't know for sure, but may have some suspicion that a property is being used as an HMO and may not be licensed. So yes, this remains a really high priority. I mean, housing, you know, when we met with the members at Bracknell and we talked about priorities, we know how important that housing was to the borough. And I think it's safe to say that's the same for West Berkshire as well. So this is an area where I can see more and more resource being basically dedicated to. We need to identify those premises. Obviously, if they're unlicensed, then we don't know that there we can't be sure that they're compliant, and their evidence showed in some of the issues that we found that they're far from compliant to some of these premises.
Yeah, and just following on from that, Sean, is it possible then to have a major bit on the PPP website regarding information regarding HMOs and what people should be looking at? Because as far as I'm aware, if the people in the premises are related, it has to be 3 or more separate families, or is it 4? So if we can let people know, because if they're related, then it's not classified as a HMO, but if they're not, then it could be classified as a HMO. So just to notify the public and members, because a lot of members aren't sure as well. So if we can just have that on our public website and obviously let members know as well.
That's a really helpful suggestion. I will pick that up and we'll get the website. I mean, there is information there at the moment, but I'll just see whether it really kind of meets what's needed in terms of the things that you've described. In terms of campaigns, obviously that's very much in line with the philosophy of the service, which is to draw awareness of issues of concern to people in the hope that people will come to us and raise their concerns with us. So again, I'll take that back to the communications lead and look at what we can do to raise the issue more widely, and hopefully basically people can raise concerns with us as they did when we encouraged people to come to us, for example, about the damp and mould issues.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, if I may, on 2 points. First one is regarding pleased to see there's a new priority in F4 licensing, and also pleased that the CSAS has now taken off and is part of the new policy. So it's good to see.
Thank you.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sean. There's some good changes in the priorities. The vaping, for example, I'm delighted to see you bringing that one up. Deleting COVID-19 recovery, I understand, but should the PPP be planning for the next pandemic? Or is it already done?
So in terms of our involvement with the pandemic, we have kept together everything that we used. I mean, obviously, with the pandemic back in 2020, and we're coming up now, I was thinking about this, almost at the third anniversary of the first lockdown. Well, that Saturday when I remember basically seeing the announcement that the new regulations would be out Sunday evening, which they were. So we've kept all of our materials. We're also basically contributing to the review that's taking place at West Berkshire in terms of overview and scrutiny. I don't know quite what's happening at Bracknell, whether there is anything particularly running, but I mean, we can pick that up and make sure. What we do need to do is to make sure that if there is any scrutiny review, that we're part of it in terms of our response. It's a little bit like the I suppose going back to 2001, which I've been around long enough to remember, with the foot and mouth outbreak. There hadn't been one since the 50s or whenever it was. And we had to basically find our way. By the time we came through to 2007, we had a lot of the materials and a lot of the knowledge that we actually needed to respond. Hopefully we won't get another pandemic within 6 years like we did with that outbreak of foot and mouth. But we have kept all of the lessons that we've learned, all of the processes, procedures and everything else, and they will be available for internal reviews, for external reviews, and for future use should we ever need them.
That's good to hear. Housing, empty homes. I'm interested to hear that you can do something about empty homes. We have a notorious one in Hungerford, which if you can get that one into use, would go down really well in some parts of Hungerford. There are a couple of things here. Changes from noise to nuisance. That sounds like quite an expansion. In the Appendix C, there's mention of Martin's Law and terrorism. Those sound like expansions to the priorities, which makes me wonder about staffing and cost and so on. And in a different way, relating to the previous item, I know all too well that the Water Safety Partnership was set up in response to an awful incident. But should the PPP be looking wider than water safety at other such issues? The Compton site in particular, going round there on a planning visit, it was clear from what some of the residents said that security on that site was not quite as wonderful as it might have been, and therefore children got into the site from time to time. Do we have a responsibility to try to stop that from happening? The site was also used from time to time for things like police training, which presumably, in fact, I'm sure involved the use of firearms. Who keeps the kids out? Do we have an involvement in this?
I don't know that much about the specific site that you refer to, but what I would say is that obviously the responsibility for restricting access to any piece of land or property rests with the owner of that property, I would imagine, as a starting point. In terms of the role of the local authority, I'm trying to think what that would be. But I think really basically the starting point is for the owners of any particular property or land, and I'm not just talking about that one, to make sure that basically access is restricted as it should be. Going back to your initial point about priorities and resources, I mean, there will always be, for a service that's involved in enforcement and to some extent involved in the delivery, I suppose, really of national and local policy work, there will always be basically changing priorities. You know, I mean, 3 years ago, who'd have been talking about vaping? It was seen as the new big thing, and you know, and obviously it has its benefits in terms of adults and reductions in smoking and things like that. But these things can come out of nowhere. in terms of, being foreseeable. But I think this is one of the benefits of the shared service. If I'm honest, I think we've got that critical mass where we're able to adapt, and we're able to shift quite quickly, as we've proved we've been able to do over the last 2 or 3 years, particularly with COVID, then followed by the response for the Home to Ukraine work, followed by more recently some of the cost of living work that we've done as well. We just adapt, but obviously there is limited resource, and we just basically have to prioritise that resource, which is obviously one of the benefits of having this committee to provide us with that guidance as to what's important. But also the way that the service is set up with a prioritisation and sort of tasking group within the service where we can focus on the things that present the biggest risk and the most immediate risk.
Well, it sounds as if you do have the resource to be able to switch priorities, and I'm delighted to hear it. And the vaping in particular, I'm thoroughly in favour of taking that one on as far as the children are concerned. That Compton site perhaps is a one-off, but I guess my interest was that, of course, you're right, but in the first instance, it is for the landowner, but things go wrong, unfortunately. And there were signs that the place had been empty, effectively unused for a long time. The fences were not looking quite as good as they might have looked, no doubt had looked 10 years earlier. I was simply asking whether we have any form of responsibility, and if so, what?
Yes, I guess I think probably what I need to do is to think beyond public protection and to think whether there is any other responsibilities, any other areas of the council. What I'll do is I'll take it away, Councillor Cole. Perhaps you and I can have a conversation, and I'll just have a look, basically see whether there's anything that falls within our remit or whether there is anything that needs to be referred to a partner organisation.
Thank you.
Okay, can't see anyone else in the room. Does anyone on Zoom have any comments or questions they'd like to ask or make?
There are no hands raised at the moment.
Who we got hands from?
There are none.
Oh, there are none. No, sorry, I think so. We did have some. It's obviously me not listening. Okay, in that case, I will ask. Well, I'll propose from the chair the recommendations that we consider the emerging priorities as set out in the report. We resolve that the PPP strategic assessment of June 2021 be updated to reflect these emerging priorities, and resolve that the updated strategic assessment form the basis of the PPP's priorities for 2023-24. Can I have a seconder for those recommendations? Councillor Harrison. So can I ask members to vote on the recommendation by physically raising their hands? Great. So that's carried. So move to item 10, the training and development plan. Moira.
Good evening, members. The training and development plan is designed to support the service plan and the workforce strategy, both of which were agreed at the January 2023 JPPC meeting. It was therefore felt that we should revisit the training and development plan, although it had only been looked at last in December of 2021, just to ensure that they remain aligned and in keeping with each other. We've only needed to make some minor changes to the training and development plan in terms of layout, aligning it to the professional bodies associated with the service, updating the governance arrangements, and including an update on where we've got to with the apprenticeship scheme as well. Members will be aware that recruitment of suitably qualified professional staff remains one of the most significant risks to this service. In addition to the mandatory training requirements of the council, we are therefore taking a three-pronged approach to mitigate this risk. Firstly, we are endeavouring to undertake personal and professional development of our existing staff. This is usually identified through the appraisal process. It can often be accomplished through the CPD process associated with professional bodies, or via training for larger groups within the service. For example, we've recently run a personal safety training course for all of our staff and are looking to hold one on safeguarding later in the year. We also encourage our staff to take up opportunities to provide feedback to their colleagues when they've undertaken training, or make use of cost-free training available from external providers. For example, we're doing some training on loan sharks, which has been provided to our staff at no cost. Second route is through the apprenticeship scheme. We've now successfully recruited to the 4 trainee officer posts, and those employees have started the level 4 apprenticeship with our provider's CSA. In addition, we have an internal training program attached as an appendix to the report, which allows the trainees an opportunity to work across the disciplines within the service. This is a living document and we'll continue to work and update it as we go along. We're also now starting to put existing staff through the level 6 apprenticeship scheme. 2 of our officers will be starting the level 6 apprenticeship in trading standards in April. And this is it's a brand new apprenticeship. These will be the first cohort of people going through it, and information continues to emerge in relation to that apprenticeship on a regular basis. And we're therefore asking, we've recently had a very useful FAQ sheet being published by the organisation, and we're asking that we can attach that as an appendix to the training plan as well. We're working towards starting the level 6 apprenticeship in environmental health in September, and we've got officers that have signed up to undertake their training as well. And we will continue to identify other opportunities to undertake an apprenticeship through the appraisal process. And this could, for example, include apprenticeships in management or business administration as well. So it doesn't only have to be within the professional disciplines within the team. There will also be some requirements that cannot be met through the apprenticeship levy scheme, and these officers would be supported through a professional qualification. Once again, these requirements will be identified through the appraisal process and will be based on service need. The process will be governed by West Berkshire Council's qualification training procedure, which sets out what is and what is not funded, and also includes a payback scheme should officers decide to leave the authority within the payback period. It is anticipated that the implementation of the plan will not only help to build a skilled and motivated workforce, but that it will help us to continue to provide good quality services and value for money for our residents, businesses, and the authorities we serve. I'm happy to take any questions about the plan if members have any.
Thanks, Moira. Anyone in the room have any questions or comments on the training development plan? Councillor Harrison, yeah.
Thank you. And Moira, I think this is a really good plan, because I think an increasing number of young people are starting to realise that getting into tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt, going to university, and then getting on a graduate programme, if they're lucky, is probably not necessarily the best route for everybody. And this gives a real alternative to actually get some training to learn how to do a job and learn how to do it well and have professional qualifications without getting into all that sort of debt. So they actually start their career in positive equity rather than negative. I think this is a very promising thing, and I think it'll be very attractive and it'll help meet the needs of the partnership in terms of recruitment.
Well,
Chairman, I'm afraid I couldn't find any potential holes in this one.
there's more will be pleased than here.
Chairman, just to say also, one of the things that we've been doing, I've been really fortunate to be going around to quite a few of the local schools, and we've been sort of talking to them about apprenticeships as a genuine option for students across the spectrum. You know, it's not just something that you used to do if you were doing a job where you're using your hands. You can do an apprenticeship in pretty much anything. I think West Berkshire Council offers over 90 different apprenticeships. So, you know, it is a fantastic scheme. And we are trying to highlight to our young people in the district. Not that apprenticeships is only for young people. I just have to point that out, that some of the people that have started our apprenticeship are also, you know, more seasoned members of the workforce. So it's not only something for young people as well.
That's great. I would agree with that. I think there's a lot of value for the authorities. There's a lot of value for the people involved. As someone who has gone through a rather drastic career change a couple of years ago from, you know, just jumping around, there's definitely a lot of value in that. So I would be in agreement with my colleagues in here that it's a very good program. So anyone on Zoom have any comments or questions they want to make?
No hands are raised.
Okay, great. So I'll happy to propose the recommendations that we consider the training development plan and approve the plan. Subject to any amendments, but it doesn't look like there are going to be any. So can I get a second for that? Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Ask members to vote on the acceptance of the recommendation by raising their hands physically. Great. So that's all our business concluded. Thanks to everyone for attending both physically and virtually. However, as councillors Porter and Cole will not be standing in the May elections, this will be their last meeting. So Councillor Porter was first elected to Bracknell Forest Council in 2011, served on the Licensing and Safety Committee since then. Also chaired the committee since 2019 and served on a number of other committees during his time. Councillor Cole joined West Berkshire in 2015 and was first elected to chair the Licensing Committee in 2018, and he too has served on a large range of committees. Both councillors were first elected to the JPC in 2019. Their contributions will be missed, as will their broad understanding as demonstrated tonight on the work of the Public Protection Service and the dedication to delivering effective licensing functions for the safety of the community. Councillor Cole, I'll come to you first. I think you both want to make to say a few words. I'll come to you first, Councillor Cole. Do you want to say a few words?
Not many, I can assure you, Chairman. I'd be sorry to go. I didn't intend to stand down at this stage, but I've chosen to do so. I'm not totally leaving the council-related arena. I hope to do some useful work in Hungerford. But I've particularly enjoyed working with the PPP. You cover a number of interesting areas, and I can only hope that my involvement has been of some use.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Porter, I think you want to say a few things as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I think that the joining of forces, initially with Wokingham, West Berkshire and Bracknell, especially during COVID, highlighted how adaptable all officers were and that everybody could join forces. And I think if the three councils had been separate, I don't think they'd have handled the COVID situation as well. I think the PPP is excellently led by Sean, and he has excellent officers underneath him. And no question is ever too much to ask. So, and I wish the PPP every success going forward. And I've enjoyed every single minute of the 12 years I've been on the committee.
Thank you. I would echo those comments about the way that the Public Protection Partnership is run. The officers we have are excellent. And I know that it sounds a bit not silly, but as someone who's not obviously not been around as long as either of you, who's not as qualified, I would say, on these matters, especially doing licensing as you guys. But I do want to sincerely thank you both on behalf of the committee, and personally, as someone who's had to chair this committee for the last year, it's made things a hell of a lot easier having such qualified individuals helping me out on the committee. So again, just want to thank you both for everything, really. So the next meeting takes place after the elections on the 12th of June 2023 in the Bracknell Forest Council offices. So yeah, that's the meeting concluded. Just wait until the Zoom host confirms the live stream has ended.